Hey guys, Jeremy back again with English 382. Since our last video on prestige bias, I wanted to move on to another form of implicit bias called perception bias. This video will be a little shorter, but again, perception bias is a very applicable form of implicit bias that surely affects people all over the country. So, first off, what perception bias is. Perception bias is basically subliminal notions to perceive situations differently because of biases you have maybe towards certain races, certain situations. Really, it could be anything. And it really, there are things that can really alter your perspectives. And what's so hard is that it's so hard to realize when you're perceiving a perception bias and, it's altering your perception from what it logically and objectively should be of a situation or of a set of information. So Jennifer Saul, in her book on implicit bias, on page 245, the book's called Implicit Bias. You can give it a Google search and find it if you would like. But she's a very respected philosopher in the community and a very smart woman. So she defines perception bias as one study that was conducted that showed when a young black man is holding an object, it is much more likely to be perceived as a weapon or as a gun than when held by, a young white man. Now, this is one instance of perception bias, one that's very easy to see because it's so visual. But the most important thing on perception bias is, even with someone you may dislike, like a certain individual, regardless of race or gender, but, a certain individual or a certain author, or whether it is a larger issue like race or gender or, sexual orientation, to always remember that sometimes these perception biases, the way we might have had a negative experience with a certain similar individual in the past, can really impact your current interactions with individuals or social situations and can really subliminally affect your reasoning and your perception of the situation. So in summary, perception bias, another form of implicit bias, and whenever you're encountering a situation where you may have had a negative association in the past, whether it be a social setting, a certain individual now resembles another individual, whatever it may be, remember that perception bias can affect your judgment and affect what you see and how you perceive it. And it's really important to take a step back and say, hey, could I be affected in this situation or from this knowledge by a previous perception bias that is now affecting me? So thanks, guys. Another form of implicit bias, perception bias. Thank you for listening.